I want to start this presentation with a quote by Wen Pin Liao, who is the director of the Center for Disability Ministry in Asia. And Liao writes, "The inviting and bringing in of people with disability means more than simply making it possible for them to be present. Instead," he says, "people with disabilities are necessary and essential members of the body of Christ. The church is, ironically, disabled without them." And my presentation last week centered on individuals with disabilities, but I started off by mentioning at the beginning of that presentation that the individuals that Jesus healed could then return to their homes, their communities, and their families. And it is actually my contention that Jesus wasn't really interested so much in individual healings as he was in restoring those communities with those people back where they belonged. And I think that's the same thing that Liao is getting at with his quote here. The church has that same opportunity to do some of that restorative work in the ways that we improve our accessibility, express inclusivity, and show solidarity with all of those who are living with a disability. I want to explain a little bit. Keith did a great introduction of me, but I want to explain a little bit tonight that I am coming to you as not four different people, but four kind of separate identities. So I'm coming to you as a person living with a disability. I'm also coming to you as a pastor who still feels called, whether she's serving a church or not, still feel called to kind of be that voice for making sure that our churches are as inclusive and welcoming as they possibly can be. I am a clergy member of this congregation of MPC. I'm also a member of the presbytery, so I'm kind of wearing all four of those hats as I do this presentation, which means that I will be saying "we" a lot tonight, and that pronoun may mean an awful lot of things. I'm gonna try to be as clear as possible as I can when I say that word, so that you know which group I'm saying "we" about. This is PowerPoint, and PowerPoint actually has it set up now so that you can choose accessible templates, which means that it looks at like the difference between the background color and the font coloring to make sure that it's very clear for individuals. It also limits the fonts that you can actually choose so that it's clearer for people to read. Trying to see, they have an accessibility check built into the program now, so that while you're building your presentation, you can look at it and it'll say, "Oh, you have one thing that you really need to look at to make this more accessible," which is very, very helpful. The one thing I want you to note on this slide is the wording that's here with the picture that kind of describes what you're seeing. That is something that's known as alt text. And typically when you see that that's there, all you will see is a little box that says alt text, and you click it and it will show you what the picture is, so that people who have some vision impairment can experience the same thing that everybody else is seeing. I put this text box on this one so that it was visible for you to see that, but in upcoming pictures you won't see that. But if somebody were to view this presentation at home, they would get a little box that says alt text, and they can either click it and read it, or if they have the ability, their computer should be able to read that out loud to them if they still can't see the text. So I really don't like the atmosphere that we're in right now. I'm grateful to do this presentation, but part of why I feel like it's really important right now is the political atmosphere that we find ourselves in, and the number of things that have shifted really quickly that have made it a little more concerning for those of us that live with disabilities. So these are some of the things that I could find, and there's 12 of them. There are things that I could find that are in danger of being deleted, defunded completely, or significantly defunded and destaffed. I'm not gonna go through these individually. If there's one of them or two that you would like me to explain a little bit more about before we move on, we can do that. But I just wanted to let you know about this as part of my background for really, really wanting to do this presentation right now. I would say if you know, and of course you all know me, but if you have neighbors, friends, family members that you know of that are living with a disability, I would ask that you please check on them and check on them kind of regularly, because we are not okay. I'm not okay. Those of us that present like we're strong are probably the ones that are doing a little worse than others. So are there any of these that you see on the slide right now that you would like me to address? And it's a moving target, so it's, you know, it's the knowledge that I have right now in the moment.
I'm not good with acronyms.
Okay.
If you could just briefly say what they are.
You want all of them?
Well, how about the first one?
That is Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program.
Yeah.
That's for helping folks who just can't seem to make their bills.
So
Especially
what
winter
about
time.
idea?
The idea is individuated disability education assistance.
Oh.
That's for school children.
And SS is Social Security.
Yes,
This one.
yes, yep.
And IMLS.
IMLS is Museum and Library Services.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you comment on DEIA?
DEIA, you are in a DEIA presentation right now. So it is diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility.
Accessibility.
And that's kind of what the administration is trying to gut completely, or just, you know, make unavailable.
Just as the White House press conference.
They got rid of the American Sign Language interpreter that was present for them. So if there's a journalist in the room with hearing impairment, they are not getting,
All right.
right, they're not getting the full content for the press conference.
Deeper.
All right, so how do we communicate in this kind of atmosphere, or any atmosphere? How do we communicate to folks who are disabled in our communities and who might be feeling like they're not really welcome or included in the world anymore? How do we let them know that they are welcome here? So this is kind of where I think you have to start. You have to start and figure out where you are, right? So you can do that through an audit, assessing where you're at right now, and there are two possibilities for that. One is right through the PCUSA. That's the one that Montreat did, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago during COVID. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's included in these in a minute. But the other one is put together by APSI and actually the PCUSA's Office of Christian Formation. It was put together, and I saw it a number of months ago and have been looking at it, and then finally found where they were talking about who had actually put this together, and it was three, well, it was a lot of people, but it was like 3 of my very good friends were involved in it. I'm like, oh, I did not know this. So that was a great thing to see. So let's look a little bit more about what these include. So the PCUSA document, as you might expect, is extensive. It is detail and task oriented. It is actually 10 pages long but a lot of that is guidance and instructions on how to do it in the first place. It includes probably about 60 statements, covers 5 or 6 focus areas, which are worship practices, leadership, ministry or mission, fellowship, and it has a large section on architectural accessibility. It also has a section on communication. So they have these 60 statements, and what they have beside them is 3 check boxes. It's either yes, no, or needs attention, which means yes, but not really. Like, yes, but not as well as we'd like to. So it needs a little bit of our work. The architectural section, as I remember, and Jim was the one who was highly involved with that, is very, very extensive, and it gives you a lot of details. Like if you already have accessible bathrooms or accessible parking spaces in your as part of your congregation, you can actually look on this audit and make sure that you're in compliance with ADA. They are that good about having the dimensions of how high it should be off the floor and how wide your parking spaces should be. So as I said, very detail oriented. The one from APSI is specifically about buildings and property for churches. It's much more general because it has the kinds of questions that they have are, I'll read you just a few of them. How many of the entrances to your building have a ramp, are flat, or have no lip or step up of any kind? Are your hallways clutter-free and well lit? Do you have another floor in your building? How do you get there? Is there any way that you can get there that doesn't involve steps of any kind? So it's much more general. It's more of a look around your building and see what it looks like right now, and not so much get your measuring tape out and everything and make sure you're in compliance. The opening statement to that APSI audit, I really kind of appreciate. It says, it can be a challenge to retrofit an older building to make it accessible, and even some newer buildings aren't as accessible as we would like. The point of this exercise is not to be perfect, but to improve the accessibility of your space in as many ways as you can. And if you sign up for the handouts, the links for both of these documents will be in the email that you'll get from me. I actually think both of these audits are good documents, and if a congregation is just getting started with accessibility and isn't sure what to even look at, I think I would recommend the APSI one just as a starting point, because you don't get as overwhelmed. I do remember when we looked at the PCUSA audit, we had to break it up into like 3 groups to even have a discussion about it, because it was just so much to even discuss. Move on. So after a congregation has done an audit, so Montreat has already done an audit, these are the steps that I think you should take kind of afterwards. First of all, celebrate, which seems like an odd thing, but celebrate unless you have found that you're doing absolutely nothing to be welcoming to those with disabilities, which no congregation is doing nothing. So everybody needs to celebrate where they're at in the moment. I think that's important. And then once you've done that, communicate. So make sure that everybody that uses your space knows exactly how accessible you are, because you have no idea who might want to come to your church but feel like they wouldn't be able to, wouldn't be able to get in the door, wouldn't be able to get into the restrooms, would have trouble just kind of getting around. So committing to being communicative about all of these things is really important. And I'm harping on that I'm gonna harp on that communication, because that is my presentation, is about communicating. I am harping on that because of those things, because people with disabilities do not expect churches to be accessible. I will say, if I'm gonna be going to a church for the very first time, I always call to make sure that it's gonna be a space I can get into. And I almost never do that with anything else. I don't call anybody else to make sure that I'll be able to get in their door. So this is really, really important.
Christine,
Uh-huh.
is that kind of something you would put on the website?
I would
it's just
put
a standard
it,
thing when people are looking.
I would put it absolutely everywhere. I put it on your email blasts. I put it on the newsletters that you send out.
And how do you
I put
phrase
it on-
something like that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you have. I mean, you would have to come up with a statement. If you're very, very accessible, that would be a long statement to include. But if you're just able to say we're wheelchair accessible, we have wheelchair parking spaces, we have accessible bathrooms, I would be as thorough as you can. But I didn't expect that question. I would think if you're gonna do that, probably and I hate to say that because it's me, but the most important thing is to make sure that people know that you're wheelchair accessible, or people can get in the door easily, because that's usually the biggest obstacle. But then after that, I think hearing, amplification systems are really important to highlight, and large print bulletins probably the next thing for worship.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't even get you off task.
No, you're good. The third thing would be to work on improving. So you've celebrated what you're doing, you've communicated it to folks, and then you just work on improving. What's the next thing we can do to be a little more accessible? And then once you've done that, flip back up to the top. Celebrate, communicate, improve some more. And I put revisit on there because the PCUSA audit does kind of recommend that you do one of these things every 3 or 4 years, so that you can see how much you have done and work on, celebrating and figuring out what you want to do next. So y'all might have noticed that my presentation this evening is on communicating these things and not so much on implementing them. And that's because I'm not an expert on the implementation. I can talk to you all night about communicating, but I don't know how to tell you to do this. And every congregation is going to have to figure it out for themselves and figure out what it is that they want to do. I also want you to understand that church buildings themselves communicate a lot to folks who are just walking or driving by. And this is a great example of this. So this is a kind of an overview shot of the capital area of Charleston, West Virginia, which is where I served my second congregation before I came down here. So I recognize these churches. I can probably figure out where this was taken. The building right here is the Capitol, if you're not familiar with Charleston. And then there are 6 churches that are in the shot. And what I can tell you, I know these buildings. I don't think I was in all of them, but I was in a couple. What I can tell you about these buildings is that even just looking at this picture, I can tell you they're inaccessible. And I can tell you that because they're old buildings. And those are either on a historic register somewhere and difficult to modify, or they're just difficult to modify and expensive to modify. So I want to start by telling you just generally, buildings communicate, but I also want to give you one example of an experience that I had where a building communicated something to me. So this is the oldest Presbyterian church in continuous use in the state of Virginia. It was established in 1740 And this building was completed in 1749. I interviewed with this congregation in 2008. It was the second of 3 congregations that I interviewed with in this presbytery. And that should tell you this is not where I went. This is the second. Largely why I didn't go is they didn't call me. But, but also, even if they did, I don't think I would have said yes. And part of it was because of the building. I liked the people. You might be able to see I was not having mobility issues then, but there are steps right here that have no railing. So it's not accessible, or not completely accessible. But one thing that I remember, and I don't think it's true anymore, so don't call me on it, because there's somebody in this presbytery who used to be here and he might call me on it. But when you step inside this building, the majority of this main level at the time was a museum. So part of the job that I would have been taking on would have been pastor and docent for people who stopped by or called and said they wanted a tour of the facility. But then, then they took me downstairs, so there's a basement level, and downstairs looked like church. Downstairs had a warm, large fellowship hall. It had all of the classrooms with the standard books and Bibles sitting around and comfortable furniture, lived-in looking furniture, and the obligatory ramshackle youth room in the corner that looked like kids had just gone in there and thrown all their stuff and walked away. But anyway, so part of the reason that I said this church communicated to me was that I learned 2 things about the congregation, and I wasn't really sure which part I would be serving. Was it the people who showed up and were prim and proper and never did anything fun, or was it the congregation that lived downstairs? So just as a reminder, churches communicate before we say a word. So we need to do a better job of really communicating, of improving the messaging that we get out there, so that despite our buildings, they know something about us. So I said I'm going to do a lot about communicating and not talk so much about facilitating or implementing things, but I do want to suggest 3 little things, and one of these, it will seem silly, the hand towels in there. That's going to seem like a silly thing. It's actually not, but I have the floor, so I'm going to go ahead and make mention of it. If you have your sink and your hand towel access at a great distance from one another, that doesn't work well for people who utilize walkers or wheelchairs, because it means you wash your hands and then you have to walk somewhere else, and what you end up doing is gripping your walker and just getting germs right back on your hands. So that's not very helpful. So if there's any way to have hand towels kind of placed near the sink, or dispensers of hand sanitizer right there near the sink, that would be really, really helpful for those of us who are finding ourselves walking and going, well, why did I wash my hands? The second thing I want to talk about is doors. The doors, often for bathrooms, but in other places in facilities, are often really heavy. And if people are trying to navigate a walker or a cane, or they have some kind of balance issue and they're pulling on a door and trying to get in, it has the tendency to kind of throw your balance off a little more than usual. So my suggestion, and I don't know if it's valid, I don't know if it would be beneficial, if it would be something that would really, really work well, I would suggest congregations look into automatic openers And they don't all look like the ones in the hospital. They're just the little wheelchair symbols on the round several buttons. There are others that look very nice. They actually look like elevator panels that go on the wall and they're motion activated, and they're very nice. So that would be a suggestion from me. The other thing is this alternatives for stairs, which can mean several different things. Exterior, it would mean probably a ramp. Interior space, it could mean a stair lift or a platform lift. If it's a full staircase, then you're looking at an elevator, which again, if you have an older building, that's probably not gonna happen. But there is one more option, and this is something that I recently discovered and was almost certain that it was gonna only be available in Europe because it's so cool. But it is actually available in this country, and it is actually available in Greenville, South Carolina. So I'm gonna hope that this video plays when I do this. Yes, it does. Oh. Huh. That's
Yeah.
cool.
It's a good MRI building. It is good. It's all got it. How everybody gets it. I've never seen that.
It requires no modification to a space. You have to take, obviously, you have to take out, if you have a set of stairs, you have to take that out, but it doesn't require any additional space in the facility that you've already got. It can be used outside or inside. It works, as you can see, by an on-call button. It actually reverts to stairs 1 minute after not being used. If it's not used for 1 minute, it reverts back. The cost for this, and I was a little surprised because it can go anywhere from 9 inches tall, so if you have like just one step, or all the way up to about 49 inches. It comes in 4 different widths, and it can hold up to 880 pounds, which seems excessive to me. But anyway, I called the company down in Greenville that has it, and I said, please, I know there's probably a wide range. How much does this cost? And he said, oh, it's between $30,000 and $35,000. And that's the range on it. That's to get it installed. And then the only other cost is just the demolition that it takes for removing the set of staircase, the little set of stairs that's already in your facility. So let's talk about other ways we can communicate inclusion. So through our verbal and written documents and memos that we put out, some of the best practices to communicate that disability folks are fully appreciated and welcomed. So these are kind of my thoughts. So if you're planning on something happening in your community and it's not going to be your standard, there's a need to let people know if they might be affected by the changes that you're thinking about making, even if it's a temporary change. So what I've got here is kind of an outline of different things to think through. If there are 2 or more viable options, ask the people who might be affected by it which one would work better for them. And that helps to make your decision a little more clearly. If there's only one workable option and you know it's not going to work for everybody, it'll affect one person or a small group, get in touch with them and let them know about the change ahead of time so that they can plan, or you can help them plan how to participate more fully. if time is of the essence, and I know this has happened a couple of times with Montreat, time is of the essence, you can't communicate to those individuals specifically, then just make sure that you state why you had to make that change, and then go ahead and still work with them to see if you can get them to a place where they can still fully participate. Okay, so does it need to be mentioned? And it is the disability. We kind of tend to, I think, if somebody has a disability and we start talking about them, we do mention their disability pretty quickly, because it becomes what's noticeable about them in some ways. So I want to advocate for limiting the occasions when you mention somebody's disability or when you name it. So in verbal and written communications, only state it if it's absolutely essential information to include. Like, if somebody this evening, if somebody else was doing a presentation on disability tonight and they were gearing it specifically toward living with, vision impairment, and they were going to talk about that, then you need to know that the person you're going to come and hear lives with vision impairment, so that you're aware that this is a good person to do this presentation. Other than that, you probably don't need information about, by the way, this person uses a walker, to put in a memo or an announcement that you put out. I think disability should never be the only descriptor for an individual, which means that you have to take the time to get to know the person as a person and not just as somebody living with a disability. And again, like I said, this is kind of just coming from me, but even in prayer requests, I don't think there's any need to mention a disability unless the request is specifically related to it. And always ask what it is that the individual, how much information they would like to have shared. So I have at the top, it's okay to ask. And I think that might need to be said, because sometimes people kind of veer away from the thought of disability. Like, either they want to ignore it, or they think that the person with disability would rather ignore it. But that's not really often the case. So these are the things that I've put down here. These are the things that are okay to ask. It's okay to ask about my disability. I'll speak for myself. It's okay to ask about my disability. It's okay to ask about the assistive device, the Eileen that I use. It's okay to ask about, investigating it to see if you have somebody that that's looking for a new walker and you want to see if this might be a good fit for them. It's okay to ask about, can I see what this is like? It's okay to ask if help is needed, and it's okay to ask what help is needed. I will qualify that one. Please don't assume. Because a lot of people do kind of assume that I know what help you need. Yeah, I know what help you need, so don't just start helping. I remember when my balance was much worse, I used to go into facilities, other places, and I would start walking in the door, and of course I'm trying to hold the door open and get the walker kind of finagled around, and people would come up and go, "Oh, I'll help," and they would pull the door. Well, that didn't help me because my balance was bad. So it's like, "Oh, please don't pull the door." But nobody asks; they assume that they know what you need. So this is my kind of guidelines. Again, if you had somebody else up here doing the presentation, you might get different comments or different statements of things that they would find helpful. So some do's and don'ts. Again, the first thing, come to know us as a person first, a disabled person second. Don't speak to our spouse, friend, or caregiver instead of us. I remember hearing Michael J. Fox saying that he always felt like he was a piece of luggage when he and his wife went through the airport, because people would ignore him. They would talk to Tracy, who's much taller, she's much taller than he ever was anyway. So they talk to her and they ignore him sitting in the wheelchair. Don't say I get it. So this is a pet peeve. This and the one underneath is our pet peeves for me. Please don't tell me you get it. And I'm not trying to be mean, disrespectful, or anything else. But unless you're living with a chronic condition day in and day out, you simply can't. You just can't. And the one that I get most often is if I say I'm tired, I'm just too tired to do anything today, and people will say, "Oh, I know, I'm tired all the time," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's different." And I'm glad that you don't know, but you just can't understand the level of fatigue that comes with autoimmune conditions. At the same time, don't equate your health issues with mine, but talk about your own health concerns. So I'm back on the do side. We want to know. I mean, we want to know what's going on with you. We want to share, together what's happening in our lives. We want to pray for and with you. So please do tell us what's going on with you, because some things might be heavier on your side, just in a different way. And then back to the don't, and again, this is my second pet peeve. Don't equate everyday accomplishments with bravery or courage.
Yes, absolutely.
I had thankfully just one experience, but I had an experience. Robin and I went to Biltmore to the gardens when Chihui was here in 2019, I believe. At that point, I was using a cane and walking on his arm, and we got to the point where we had to go from the upper part of the gardens to the lower, and I was stepping off of the last step, and I was looking down, so I didn't even really see her, but this woman rushed up in front of me, and she was a perfect stranger, and she said, "I don't know who you are, but you're my hero." And I thought, oh, I'm just trying to enjoy the garden. I'm doing the same thing you're doing. It's just harder for me. That doesn't make me a hero. Me showing up in the same places that you can go easily doesn't make me brave or courageous. It just makes me working to do what I want to do. So these are my two. Don't say I get it. Please don't tell me I'm brave. Now, I will say, if I do something that impresses you, something that's beyond, showing up, and you want to tell me that I'm, inspirational or brave or courageous, whatever, I don't mind that, but don't equate it with everyday things. I did a hymnal search for words, and it came up, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was like, I think stand showed up like 124 times or something in our hymns. It's used that many times. Then there was walk, there was look or see, there was hear and listen, there was sing and speak. All of those words showed up dozens of times in the words of our hymns. And especially, stand up for Jesus. Well, we know that one. That's obviously, that's an issue. That's not going to happen for me, or at least not all the time. Did last week, not today. Open my eyes that I might see. And the reason people say that this might be ableist, and you'll see I have question marks there, is this ableist or is it not? Open my eyes that I might see kind of indicates that there's a need for healing before we can see or encounter God. Holy, holy, holy. I'm skipping Amazing Grace for a second. Holy, holy, holy has changed words twice over, I don't know the period of time that it's changed. There's one line in there that used to say, though the eye made blind by sin, which of course is problematic because it equates disability with sinfulness. It changed later to though the eye of sinful man, which corrected some of the theology, but didn't correct the gender exclusivity, which I guess is okay for women, you know. It's
Worked out well.
and eventually now they decided women were sinful too, I guess. So now it's changed to though the eye of sinfulness, thy glory may not see. That's the rest of the phrase. But it's coming to be a little more inclusive and a little less ableist. Amazing grace. So dearly loved him, but there is that line in the refrain that says, I once was blind, but now I see. Which of course is metaphorical in nature, and I think most of us take it as a metaphorical statement. But some have actually complained that it states that being sighted is better than being blind, or that sight is the norm, which means that being blind or having vision impairment is abnormal. So, does all of this mean that these are ableist? I think that's a little bit debatable, but I do think what's really interesting is I investigated this while I was doing this presentation, and I saw there's a statement in the back, a theological statement, and it talks about who all was involved in the crafting of the hymnal, and it's got clearly on there that the disability consultants for our denomination were part of the group that decided which hymns to include in the book. So they voted for all of these things to be included, which means that there was less of a concern for them. Part of the concern, I think, was, and they have kind of remedied it, is the theology that says that disability has this connection to sinfulness. Another consideration was the inclusion of hymns that lift up another perspective, and I think that's important. So that's the two that I've got listed here: When Hands Reach Out and Fingers Trace, and Healer of Our Every Ill. I know we have done Healer of Our Every Ill a few times. That one speaks to the act of healing not as being cured of something, but as being in God's presence and relying on the strength and the love that you get from God in the midst of struggles. When Hands Reach Out, have we done that one? Yeah.
I don't remember choosing that one.
I know it's one of the ones I'd read an article, and they were lifting up all of these phrases, and I thought, wow, these are really pretty. There must be a lot of hymns in the hymnal that lift this up, and they kept pointing. They had a little number next to them, and every time I hit the number, it went to the same hymn, and I went, oh, we have one hymn. And it actually describes the abilities of those with physical limitations as beautiful and necessary gifts. And some of I'll just read you a few of the phrases. One of them is, we thank you, God, that love relies on gifts of grace not seen with eyes. And another one is, when fingers spell and signs express our prayer and praise and thankfulness, we thank you, God, that hands can sing. And I think that one is just beautiful. I played it over a while back, and I can't remember the melody now, but I think it was fairly easy to pick up. So I want to point to, when I left that second one in there, I meant to take that second choral music out of there. So one of the first choral music selection here is one that the congregation has done just once, I think, or twice.
I don't think we ever got to do that.
Did you never get to?
Not yet.
All right, well, okay. It's interesting that it's a piece that's about inclusivity. It's about drawing the circle wider and including more and more people in it. But there's a problematic phrase in the song, and I had actually gone to Vivian about it because it was gonna kind of point to me when we were singing, because it's draw the circle wide, draw it wider still, and then it says no one stands alone, and I'm like, I'm gonna be in the choir and I'm gonna be the only one sitting, everybody else is standing, and that's gonna look a little weird. So I did talk to Vivian, and she thankfully got in touch with the composer and had worked on, and I think you're right, I don't think we did get to sing it.
No.
But she had worked out some new wording that said, let me make sure I've got it. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still, and then it says, draw the circle wide, no one is alone, and we'll be side by side. So just very little change necessary to make that transition. But I think, and I'm gonna skip the will you hold me in the light, because that's a more complicated issue to talk through. But I think this is what makes it okay to have these kinds of hymns that, some people say might sound a little ableist. I think this is what makes it okay to have them in the hymnal, because you have this balance. You have, other hymns that you can lift up that make different statements. And you have, receptive choir directors like Vivian and others in other congregations who are willing to listen if somebody says, hey, this is striking me a little bit, it's striking me a little bit wrong, and I think this is something that we should think through together. As long as you have that kind of openness and willingness to listen and knowing that you're being considered, again, I know all of these hymns, I know they're there, but they've never really struck me as, hey, this is a statement against me. So one of the most problematic things that I think we end up doing in worship time is this invitation to stand. And it's problematic. It kind of started off, you can see some of the progression. So we started with, please rise or stand and join us in whatever, the call to worship or this hymn. That's problematic for people who have difficulties, and actually I think it's a little bit more problematic because a lot of people will try to do it because there's a pressure. If everybody else around is doing it, you feel like you should. Some of the better things are please rise in body or spirit. I've heard people say please adopt a posture of prayer or reverence, which means you figure it out. If you want to stand, stand. If you want to sit, just kind of raise your hands or put your hands together. That's fine. The last one is let us turn or lift our hearts and our voices to God as we join in our call to worship or sing this hymn together. So I think that those are better. Those are obviously better than just please stand. The other thing that I want us to think about, and it doesn't often happen in worship, but it does happen in gatherings, is when you want somebody to kind of be seen or known and you ask them to stand. That's kind of the norm, is please stand so that everybody can see you. And usually what they do is, you stand, I have had this at Presbyterian meetings, please stand, and then you're standing, and then they say, well, and then I'm going to have somebody else stand, and oh no, you stay standing. Well, now you've put everybody on a lot of pressure. And there are options. You can say, raise your hand, wave your arms, yell out, here, or me, or something. There are options, and I think that's things we need to consider with our people in our congregations. Social opportunities, including folks who, despite your best efforts, just can't come, various occasions. And I think we found a lot of this at COVID. I was very attuned to the fact during COVID that what was actually happening was everybody was becoming like shut-ins. I think you all recognized it, but I think I really recognized it because when things went back to normal, everybody kind of breathed a sigh of relief and went back to normal. And the folks who were stuck at home, you know, our home shut-ins were still at home. And we kind of forgot, some of us forgot about them a little bit. So I think some of these things are helpful to keep social opportunities, like church chat was wonderful during the pandemic. You know, try to keep things like that going on a regular basis. Doesn't have to be every week, but you know, every once in a while have something like that available. These educational events, you know, have them recorded and available for people to watch later is fantastic. Committee inclusion, the same kind of thing, having people available to join by Zoom so that they can be part of the discussion. All of those things are fabulous. We've got live stream worship. Other places are still doing Zoom, but that's also really helpful. This, I won't pull it up because I don't think it's gonna let me, but I actually put together a little document that's just a sign in. It's like a virtual attendance pad, and you could put this as a link underneath your live stream feed and let people click on it. It might make them feel a little more like they're in worship instead of just at home watching from a distance. But that was just one thing that I had thought of. All right, so I have thrown a lot of information at you. Here are my caveats. You will never get all of this right, and you will never be able to accommodate everybody's needs. I said that to my audit team, and I got pushback about, yes, no, we'll figure it out. We'll be able to accommodate, and you can't. There will always be some conflicting interests or conflicting needs. And there have been, for us, a couple of times since. There was a concern, the choir loft, I needed to be able to get up into the choir loft, but we put it on the floor for a while, and then we had somebody that couldn't hear while we were on the floor, so we went back up. So it's conflicting needs. The elevator being out was a second conflicting need. We had people that, you know, who are here, who want to get in the space and be with us for worship. But we also have people joining by live stream. So it's, you know, you have to balance the needs and try to figure out the best ways to accommodate as many people as you can. So, this is Waldo during COVID. We can see Waldo very clearly. This is how people with disabilities feel the vast majority of the time. Far too visible, always on display, and always vulnerable. And I will tell you, at least from my perspective, we don't like that. We don't like having to be that vulnerable, but we're not the only ones that feel that way. I have had at least one person in the two congregations that I've served who veered away from worship when they started having a hard time. I had a youngish mother, she was probably late 30s, in my first congregation who lost her dad unexpectedly. And I remember her coming to me after the funeral and saying, I won't be in worship for a while because I can't bring myself to come there and cry. And I mean, I tried to convince her, and she disappeared for a couple of months. I also had a woman in my second congregation who dealt with some nervous energy. She couldn't sit still in worship, and she used to get up and walk around and walk around in the back. I'm not like walking all over the place, but there was a very large back space beyond all of the pews, and she would just kind of pace back and forth in the back. And she always apologized to me, and I would try to convince her, it's not bothering me. I'm focusing on other things. I don't even notice you. And because she was so embarrassed by it, she rarely came on Sundays. I don't know when that started being true, but it seems like we have made a misconnect between thinking that we're supposed to give our best to God and thinking that we can't make mistakes, or we can't show up if things are going wrong in our life. We can't show frailty or have negative emotions like sadness, lament, doubt. But I don't think we're helping ourselves by cordoning off that part of our reality to a place outside of our church buildings. And we're certainly not creating an atmosphere, an environment where people with disabilities are going to feel like they're fully welcome. Because we with disabilities come with complicated feelings and complicated situations. We come actually vulnerable. We have no choice. It accompanies us wherever we go. I, for one, cannot tell you the number of times that I have cried in your sanctuary because I was grieving the life that I thought I was going to have, and I was missing the stuff that I really wanted to do, like hiking. And I was mad at God. And I felt like God was either alternately or at the same time paying no attention to me and paying too much attention to me. And so if those of us who are able-bodied, currently able-bodied, and of full cognitive skills and intellectual capacities, if those folks can't be open and honest about the struggles in their lives or feel like they have to veer away from the church, if they can't be okay with imperfection, then those of us who live with disabilities, who often feel like we're not good enough in the world outside, are not going to feel like we belong inside the church either. And I think that will be a detriment to us all. I think that goes back to what Leal said at the beginning. It will make the church disabled in some way. I want to end with a poem by Rodell as the closing prayer. This is John Rodell. He's one of my newest favorite poets, and he writes about vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't mean telling others what happened to us from across a cafe table or from behind a microphone, and then going home from the experience feeling just as alone as you did before. Vulnerability means allowing your human heart blanket to get sewn to other heart blankets. It's about connection. We don't share for status. We do it for synergy. We don't confess for clout. We do it to build community. We tell our tale to invite others to tell theirs. It's the sacred cycle of storytelling. We gather in a circle of trust and say, here is my journey. And then we listen to other journeys that are shared. We take space. And then we give space. We pour and then we absorb. We speak and then we listen. We are storytellers and then we are witnesses. Vulnerability isn't just about grave digging in our past to expose our skeletons. It's about sewing quilts. Here is my patch. Here is your patch. Here is their patch, and here is us. And this is our story. Amen.
Amen. How about it for Christina?